Good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to go ahead and advance our slides here. I think our ACOI friends wanted you to click on that. If you're not a member yet, please do. I do believe that is free for residents and students, and it is a high value. Would highly encourage that. So we're going to go right ahead, see if this will work. This is me. My name is Jason Beckrow. I am a proud alumnus of MSU COM and a member of ACOI ever since my residency days, and honored to be here with our residents and whoever's listening today. We're going to talk a little bit about some facts and fictions about work-life balance. I've got about 20 minutes, so I'm going to try to make this high yield. I think we've got some questions fired up and ready to go. And if anyone's listening in has questions, please use the chat. Let's make this as much of a dialogue as we can. And another thing, how about we agree? We won't cover all of this in the next 20 minutes, or at least have a perfect solution in the next 20 minutes. But let's aim to keep this an ongoing dialogue. I'll drop my email in there at some point so that you'll know how to find me. If you have questions after you watch this, please drop me a line. Let's have a chat. Some of our goals to cover for today, our objectives. Let's talk about what balance is. And basically, let's talk about what is work, what is life, how do we make them balance, who determines that? Spoiler alert, that's not something that's going to be created outside. It's really going to be something that you as an individual need to craft for yourself and for the people most important to you. We're going to talk a lot about setting priorities. So when we talk about work-life balance, what we're really talking about is having a work situation that is in balance with an individual's personal priorities. We're going to talk about personal mission statements, your non-negotiables. What are those things that are absolutely, there is a hard stop there. There is a line and I do not cross it. We'll talk a little bit about that and what that means. Let's talk about understanding organizational value. What value do you bring to your organization, and therefore what leverage do you have? As a resident, you probably feel like you have very little leverage. There's a lot of work to be done, long hours to be worked. You're getting paid very little. You have a high need to be doing these services so that you can complete your training, get your licensure, go forward, become attending physicians. Because of that, relatively speaking, your leverage a little bit less right now. Hopefully, we can build that over time. So as your lever gets longer, your priorities become more crystal clear. Again, you can work toward a life and an employment situation that is in balance with who you are and where you want to be. Another spoiler alert. A lot of times when we talk about work-life balance, we talk about, how do we get more vacation time, take care of ourselves and stuff like that. Very, very important. I think if we leave out the concepts of finance, of economics and financial literacy, I've done you a disservice. A lot of having work-life balance is having enough in the bank so that I can absorb. Maybe my health institution just went through a merger. And where there was five of us before, now they say they only need four. That can be really hard for an individual, or maybe we're all going to contract. If I've been savvy, if I've been diligent, consistent, build some good saving habits early in my life, maybe my reservoir, my buffers, right? My nest egg safety nets are such that I can sustain that. Because if you can sustain these financial hits, it gives you more choices. Giving you more choices gives you more leverage. If you can sit down at a negotiation table and have the ability to walk away at any point for any reason, that is leverage that not everyone has. I want you to have that. Let's work together to see how we get that. But basically, it's becoming financially savvy yourself. And then I added in there the importance of physical and emotional health. Again, you can do all the right things financially, but if it costs me my health, and that can be when I say emotional health, that can be the health of my relationships. There are a lot of taxes or taxing events that if I don't have those in priority could get out of balance. So let's not forget that too. All righty. So let's talk about first part of this balance situation, Who determines that? I do get a lot of questions from time to time, folks coming up and saying, let's look at this contract and does it have good work-life balance in it? Again, the balance comes from you as an individual. It is not something an employer is going to give to you. Because again, an employer, let's think about it from their perspective. Um, they've got a lot to manage. They've got a lot of employees. They may employ hundreds and maybe thousands of physicians. So what is balance for doctor number one and doctor number 1,000 are probably grossly different. So the employer is probably not going to spend a whole lot of time trying to find the perfect balance situation for all 1,000 docs. But we can talk about things about hours worked, reimbursement rates, vacation time, call schedules, things like that. And now you as an individual need to determine what balance is. A question I put down there that I think is really, really important, as especially now, if you're a resident, you're making a little bit. If you're a third year resident, you may be looking at a contract and maybe by this fall or later this summer even be working as an attending. And so that little bit becomes a little bit more, maybe hopefully a lot more. How much is enough? Right? We're going to start talking about one principle of financial literacy is, budgeting, how I determine what is enough, and then based on that concept of paying yourself first. But I put the what is enough out there because I want you to know that no matter how much you earn, there's probably always going to be someone making at least a little, if not a lot more. And so as I make X, boy, next year maybe I can make 1.1X. And maybe in 10 years I can make twice X. And maybe in 20 years I can make 5 times X. That's fine. But then what is enough? If you email me, I'll tell you a funny story of what is enough for me. It's not fancy cars. It's not a lot of material things, but it involves McDonald's and the ability to afford a meal there. It's a funny story, but we're limited on time, so I'll tell you that later. But I want you to determine what is enough, because the moment you know you have enough, and then you earn more, you're going to be living in rather than a scarcity, you'll be living in a world of abundance. And again, the more that happens, I think the anxiety goes down, lots of good things. That's what I want for you. Setting priorities. Now, again, you need to be the person that sets those priorities. What is important to you? What's most important to me may be very different than you. Okay. I will speak a little bit here about those things that I valued. I recently wrote an article and I was thinking about, people I've met along the way and priorities we've set. Let me also, I probably should have said this early on. I am no expert in the world of finance. I am no expert in, I haven't never given a TED talk on, how to find a work-life balance or anything like that. I'm really coming to you from my own personal experience, what I've learned from others. I've learned over the years too not to be bashful to ask for help. Most people want to share very graciously. Been very fortunate to be the beneficiary of a lot of good advice. I've been very lucky in a lot of ways. I've had some bad luck too, but in general, I'm grateful that a lot of things have kind of, at least the really important things have broken my way. School of Hard Knocks as well. Be more than happy to tell you anything that I talk about today that sounds like I really know what I'm talking about probably was born out of some, big mistake I made in the past. That's another life lesson. Learn from your mistakes. If you can learn to do that, we're going to be good. The concept of a personal mission statement. I first read about this in a book called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I will reference at the end. Written by Stephen Covey. I read it, in fact, when I was a resident. I'm like, man, that is a really good idea. It took me about 20 years. I believe I read it probably somewhere around 2002 or 3, because I probably was somewhere in the second half of my residency. Said it was a good idea, and my first version that you see there was written in 2022, so nearly 20 years later. So if you don't do it this weekend, you've got a lot of wiggle room. You'll be ahead of me. A personal mission statement takes into account what are my priorities. And again, maybe it took me 20 years to really define that. And then based on that, what are the things that are most important to me? And this mission statement helps me when I have, let's say I've got 5 opportunities. I need to make a choice because I have 5 opportunities, but only the time to do one. I ask the question, does this add value to my mission statement or take away? Right? What's always been very important to me, I love being a doctor. Man, I really do enjoy being a doctor. I enjoy the opportunity to help people when they're really in need. But there's a lot of other things I am before I'm a physician. In my vision, you see there, I'm a husband, a father, a brother, a son, a friend, a colleague, a mentor, a teacher, and a physician. I put physician last very importantly because if you only knew me in one way, yeah, I'd want you to know me as a husband and a father. I lost my father when I was in high school. He died in a car accident. It was a very tragic event, a very you know, profound part of my origin story and whatnot. And so having a family has always been very important to me. So even in medical school and residency, that really helped kind of give me clarity. I started, I got married when I was in medical school. I started my family. My wife and I decided to wait, but we had children after medical school. But during my residency, I chose that. That was part of my work-life balance because I figured if anyone was going to fault me for saying, "Hey, I can't play golf this weekend because I want to spend some time with my newborn son or daughter," well, I think that's more their problem than mine, right? So I defined very early on, in addition to being a physician, I wanted to be the best husband, father, brother, son, friend. I love being a good colleague, right? A partner. I love mentoring. Oh my gosh. I now spend half of my week doing my regular clinical role and about half my week hanging out with first and second year medical students and teaching them the basics of clinical skills and how to be a doctor. I love teaching. So that's how I have found balance at this stage in my life. This is unique to me. Okay. So what is it for you? Be thinking about that. Again, feel free. Drop me a line, we can talk about those things. Okie doke. So again, when it comes to work-life balance, you need to define what is the work you're willing to do, what is the life you want to lead, and how you keep that in balance. So let's understand the concept of power in the workplace, the concept of leverage. Because again, if I'm interviewing for a spot and I'm right out of training and I say, okay, here's the deal. I see you give your veteran physician 6 weeks of vacation time. So I want 12. And whatever you're paying them, I want double. I mean, that's a ridiculous example. At least I hope that sounds ridiculous to everyone because again, I haven't earned anything yet. So early on, you got to kind of pay your dues. But again, you need to define what are your non-negotiables? What are those things that what are the things I'm willing to do? What are the things I'm not willing to do? And again, based on that, work on creating that leverage. The best way to do that is that you start your new role. Well, heck, your residents right now, you realize you're kind of interviewing every day. On every rotation, there's a hierarchy. If you're a first year resident, you're probably reporting to a second or third year resident. You may be on a cardiology rotation, so maybe there's a cardiology fellow, a junior attending, a senior attending, the chief of the cardiology service, the chief of staff, the chief medical officer. Earning that leverage is by giving the highest quality work you possibly can. With integrity has a lot to do with that. Once you demonstrate that you are always willing to do the very best job possible within those reasonable guidelines, your trust and credibility will grow. Over time, that helps you build that leverage so that be in a position where, you know, a lot of times you get into an office situation, especially if you're in a big health system, and sometimes things go sideways. Next thing you know, you're talking to HR. Early on, you got to build that credibility. Hopefully, later in your career, you'll be given the benefit of the doubt. But you do that by earning that every day. So out of the gates, we can't expect to be given the world for a very marginal effort. You got to give a really good effort, high quality, and then start to earn that slowly over time. Okay, so recognize there are dynamics in the workplace, and let's operate within our sphere of influence and things such as that. Okay, let's keep on going. I want to move now into the concept of financial literacy. So I think this is one of the most important things that you can do right now. Ultimately, there's some really simple principles. You try to spend as little as possible, generate as much revenue as you possibly can, save as much as possible. We'll start getting into the concept of making investments and things like that. The reason I bring finance up early and often is because I know most of you listening in right now, if not all of you, probably have some significant educational debt. And I think when we start talking about pie in the sky stuff without being mindful that the debt that you have, interest is accumulating. And that can sometimes feel like this tsunami or this tidal wave of anxiety provoking as you watch those numbers go up. And so I would love to do whatever I can to help support you understand, just the basics of how this works, to help you in such a way to pay that debt off as fast as possible, to live a lifestyle that's within budget. And again, budgets can be very highly variable. In my article, I talk a lot about early on. Again, I wanted to start my family. So everything was really geared towards what was high priority to me. The moment my son, we found out we were expecting, we opened up an educational account and we started saving for my son's college education even before he was born. Very proud of that fact. And when the time came and he went to college, it was already paid for. We didn't take many extravagant vacations early on. But man, if my in-laws would take us to Disney World and take the kids with us, man, I showed a lot of gratitude. I had a colleague who he and his partner, um, they eventually got married. They eventually started a family, but early on, they wanted to travel and see the world. And that worked really well for them. I loved living vicariously through them. This was before the days of Facebook. So when they came back, they'd show us their pictures and stuff like that. I'm actually going to see this friend. He's an ER physician, lives in Orlando. I'm going to be flying down there in late March. I'm going to fly in on a Friday night, go to a Detroit Tigers spring training game, come home on Sunday. Again, we've had a wonderful friendship. We have very different priorities on some of these things, and we're the best of friends because we support each other in those ways. But we also learn the importance of becoming financially literate early. I would encourage you, there is a question that's waiting for me about hiring a financial pro to do this. I think you can learn a lot by reading some simple books, some that I recommend offhand. The Millionaire Next Door. That's going to be a time investment, probably 10 to 20 hours of your reading time. Or you could just use like a AI and just screen it and give me a 15-minute version of that. Very simple. Spend as little as possible, save as much as possible, get on the fat end of that compound interest curve, and then live well as that takes off for you. Okay, so let's not. It's not all about the money, but my friends, it's not never about the money either. And I want to be very clear. I see money as a tool. I see money as leverage. Being financial secure reduces my anxiety to make me more present with my family, my friends, my community. I can volunteer. I'm a member of our local school board. I sit on the board of the Boys and Girls Club. I wouldn't be able to do that if I were living paycheck to paycheck. All right. So I do see money as a very important tool that can be used to do a lot of community good. It helps me get to my personal mission statement, especially the part is to add value to the world as much as possible. I'm a curious dude. I like to learn. I want to be grateful and appreciate life as much as possible, and I want to add value. I want to know that I'm giving more back than I took in, and if I do that, I'm feeling good about that. Okay, so let's keep moving on. Last thing I want to talk about the importance of remembering your physical and emotional health. Because if it does become all about the money, right, and I'm neglecting my relationships, a lot of our family members will give us a lot of grace. As physicians, people know you're busy, right? So they're going to give you a lot of grace. But man, if we're gone too long, those relationships can go stale, sometimes go south. I spent a lot of my 40s really grinding it out. I'm a big dude. My BMI has always been in that obese range. Even when I was most fit, I was a college athlete. But I know what can happen if I let things go. And I love that in my 50s now, I've made some choices. I work a little less. I have chosen those things that give me a headache to jettison those to be able to do the things that I enjoy the most. I make a little less these days by making those choices, but I think I live a lot better, a lot healthier. That allowed me last year, for the first time in nearly 20 years, I trained. I initially intended to walk a half marathon. And lo and behold, I still have a little bit of juice in this body and my joints that I was able to jog. I did not break any land speed records, but that's a picture of me and my son at the finish line of a half marathon last fall. What I love about this picture, my son is a trained college athlete. He just recently graduated. He was a varsity swimmer. You can see he's very tall, very lean, very athletic, and it was a joyful thing. We kind of did it together. I set the goal early on. He heard about it. He joined in, so we did it as a family affair. He ran a lot faster than me, was finished a lot sooner than me, but he kept an eye out for his old man. So that at this stage of my life is one way of keeping things in balance. So again, I think this is my last academic slide. Here are some references that I talk about a lot. Tate Shanafelt at the Mayo Clinic writes a lot of good stuff. I really like, you see a lot of books behind me, not, in fact, most of them right behind me are not medical. I do have a section for those medical books, but I like learning things outside of medicine. And so the Harvard Business Review is a wonderful, I get a subscription to that. And there's always good stuff in there. Like that a great deal. Some books that I recommend. Again, I mentioned The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. It is dated. So if you read it, it was published in the 1980s by a guy doing research in the 70s and 80s. So it's, there's some generational changes, but if you could filter through that, those seven habits I think are really important. Be proactive. Begin with the end in mind. That's where the personal mission statement comes from. Thinking, win-win, synergize, seek first to understand, then be understood. Um, um, and then the last one, oh, sharpening the saw. That's where taking care of our emotional and personal health. So I quote the Seven Habits a lot. My son gave you this lecture. He'll tell you he's been reading that since middle school, and dad makes him do reading assignments from time to time. I love Atomic Habits if you get the chance. How you can do really small things consistently and over time they have value, including saving for your retirement and things like that. You can make small investments today that over the next 20, 30, 40 years will compound. So Atomic Habits is one published in 2018. I like a great deal. The Millionaire Next Door, I read also when I was a resident. You can see that's rather dated, 1996, but the principles are the same. You want to be a prodigious accumulator of wealth, a PAW, right? That means live below your means, save as much as you can, and then utilize that economic leverage to do as much good as possible. The white coat investor, right? That's one of our physician colleagues. I refer to that quite a bit. I would encourage you. There's actually a website as well, and my guess is you can join a mailing list and whatnot. Lots of really good information in there, very germane to physicians. I recently read The Psychology of Money. That's where I learned that phrase. You need to define what is enough. He talks about like hedge fund managers who are making, several $1 million a year, and that's not enough. And they make some choices that landed them in jail, broke, and a lot of other things. We don't need to do that. Define what's enough for you. And the moment you're making that and you go north, man, life is good. That happened for me the moment I realized I can walk into a McDonald's at any point in time and tell my kids anything you want. It's a simple little thing, but it puts a grin on my face, and that's a true story. Good to great. I read that, I think, when I started into practice, and the concepts there that are universal are first who, then what. Surround yourself with good people. What is your hedgehog concept? What is the one thing that you and only you can do to the 99th percentile or best in the world? And then how do you get that flywheel going? And then lastly, I love Michael Lewis. He wrote Moneyball, The Big Short, Liar's Poker. He's a former bond trader, but writes really, really well. So I think I've gone over my 20 minutes. So why don't I turn this back to our leadership team here, and then whatever questions I can answer, or however we can go from here. Kira or Sarah, do you want to take this over now? Or
Yep. Dr. Harb, did you have any questions you wanted to ask?
Yes, I have a few questions. First and foremost, I want to say thank you, Dr. Beckrow, for this talk. Um, the first question that I have, I thought it was interesting that you brought up the topic of leverage. Seeing, a lot of my fellow PGY3 residents looking for jobs at the moment, um, and they're telling me about the contracts that they're pursuing and, the things that they see. Um, at least in kind of the area that we're in the Northeast, like a pretty populated area, a lot of competition. A lot of them are saying that, a lot of the package deals or things that they're, getting on these offers are kind of set in stone or, hospital specific of this is the blanket thing that we give everybody their first job in. Um,
Yep.
and again, as you were saying, leverage accumulates over the course of your career as an early career physician as well. But even at that first stage of your, looking for that first job, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on, what leverage you still have and what you can
Yeah.
negotiate at that point.
Yeah. So again, it's kind of simple supply and demand. And the reality is there is a demand for your services. And yes, you're going to hear a lot from health systems saying, here's a boilerplate contract, take it or leave it. I think at this stage of your career, spend a lot of time looking at that, knowing that there is definitely going to be some potential wiggle room. Not as much as you would probably like. And so maybe a better investment in your time now is look at the formula that's there. And there's going to be some simple formula, maybe a base salary with then a productivity bonus. So where I would go to is, okay, let's look right at that productivity bonus and how do I generate that? I'm a competitive person. I like to be competitive in a non-zero sum fashion. I'd rather us be competing together than against each other. But early on in your career, it's going to feel far more of a zero sum. If the hospital gives you more, they lose, and then it's that back and forth. But recognize that at the end of the day, this all comes down to a basic math equation, right? You've trained for a long time to be able to provide services that have value. The more you do that, the more utility is generated. One form of that utility is in their receivables, right? They're going to bill for all of these services. They're going to get a fraction of that back. The more that pot grows, how do they share that with you? So what I would do right now is one, don't try to do this alone. If you're a second year resident right now, talk to your third year colleagues and what are they seeing? Talk to your the residents who graduated during your first year. Talk to your junior colleagues in whatever system you're in and try to talk as openly about your contracts as possible. And the more we share that information, the more information you have, the more prepared you are to negotiate. Okay. Yes, early on it's going to feel very limited. So where I would spend my money is what is the compensation? What is the bonus structure? How do I make the most of that? And then do the best job possible so that when it comes time to renew that contract, you have a lot of value within the organization. And now you make the choice, do I choose to stay or move on?
Thank
And
you.
it's a process too. Okay.
Thank you.
Of course.
Um, the other question that I wanted to ask was, I know you had brought up that you spend time with medical students and do some teaching as part of your career path. Um, when residents hear the term academic medicine or want to pursue academic medicine, I feel like we don't really get a good grasp of what that really means, and we think of it as this kind of tertiary, all-encompassing term.
Mhm.
But, and, you know, many times we hear that people take a pay cut when they pursue academic medicine as well. I'm curious to hear, you know, what are your thoughts on that? Is it kind of a catch-all phrase, or can that mean different things to different people when it comes to satisfaction for your job as well
Yeah.
as the balance?
That's a really good question. And I will answer that as a non-academic, right? I'm an adjunct professor, assistant professor, meaning I show up, I do my thing, I go home, dean sends me a paycheck, and everyone's happy. Contrast that to my colleagues that are on a tenure track, right? And so their responsibilities are they have a clinical responsibility, they have a research responsibility, they probably have a teaching responsibility, they probably have a publishing responsibility. Now, if you know, go back to our personal mission statements, our personal values and priorities. For some of my colleagues, that is like the greatest thing ever. For them, going into the lab and you know, running those experiments and learning those things and going to conferences and presenting those posters on bench science, that's what fills their bucket. I have a friend that's a biologist and he looks at fungus all day long. And to him, that is the greatest thing in the world. It wouldn't work for me, but it works for him. So that's his work-life balance, right? So I think the term academic can sound like a catch-all, but within there, I think no matter what you do, there's a lot of ability to craft this in such a way that it gives you value and meaning. Okay. I personally, I'm a very curious creature, and I've learned that I can only do the same thing, professionally speaking, for about 5 to 10 years. You know, the first year is the best thing ever. The second year, it's still really good, but I kind of get distracted. By year five, I'm I'm doing this on autopilot, and that's why you see so many books behind me that have nothing to do with medicine, because I gotta, you know, this brain of mine is very curious and needs to be exploring. So I've reinvented myself several times. I'm trained as a medical oncologist, did that full time the first half of my career. I've always been drawn to hospice and palliative medicine. That's probably what drew me to oncology, quite frankly, because I've always done hospice care for my patients as you know they got to that point where that was necessary. About the 10-year mark of my career, I started doing hospice and palliative medicine more on a full-time basis. There was a period where I had two full-time jobs. The money was fantastic. The time with my family, not so much. Needed to make a decision. So I chose to stop taking new patients in my oncology clinic and focused more on the hospice and palliative medicine. Part of the reason it was far more administrative, meaning I sit at a desk and I look at spreadsheets and I dictate into this phone and I talk to lawyers and accountants and CMS personnel, which would never have been anything I would have considered right out of training. But at that stage of my life, I could leave at 5 in the afternoon, go watch my son swim as a freshman in high school, put my kids to bed, and then get back and finish my work when they were sleeping. And then another 5 plus years after that, post COVID, got a call from the dean, and would you like to come do some teaching of first year medical students? And I'm like, you know, I could afford to not work on Wednesdays now. And the dean's asking me to come up on Wednesdays and hang out with these students. He's going to send me a check. I felt like a good deal because I had the financial leverage to leave my position. Again, if I'd been living paycheck to paycheck, I probably wouldn't have been able to do that. Now we're talking about burnout, moral distress, all that stuff. That's probably the follow-up lecture we should be having is how do we manage those things? Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. Kara, would you like me to go through the questions that are here on this document?
Sure. I can ask them if you want. So the first ones are kind of a two-parter.
Yeah,
What's one recommendation you would have for residents to balance their financials during residency? And the
yeah,
kind of alley-oop on that is, do you think it's worth it to employ a financial advisor during residency?
yeah. So I'm going to speak very candidly here. First, do you need an advisor? Given your relative financial scarcity right now, I would be leery. Anyone who wants to give their services to you now, unless it's like your brother-in-law or something like that, be very leery. Because at the end of the day, right, there's a profit motive involved, and hopefully they're thinking about doing this in a win-win fashion. But everyone's trying to get ahead. So buyer beware. I recommend rather than employing a financial advisor, we're smart people. You can, and it's not real hard. This really isn't that complicated. There's a lot of good resources out there how you can kind of become your own financial advisor right now. Um, as far as the cost in balancing your financials, it's very simple. You try to spend less than you make. If you're spending more than you're earning, you're going to be in debt. And I mean, I think of med school debt, generally speaking, as a sound investment. Purchasing a home and having a mortgage, sound investment. Having credit cards that are maxed out and accumulating a lot of high interest, not the most sound investment. So a lot of this is learning to live, well within your means, spending, creating a budget that is acceptable, and ideally, my monthly going out is less than my monthly coming in. Um, Pay yourself first. Very important. And what that means is you get paid every 2 weeks. If you pay all the bills first and then you save what's left over, spoiler alert, your spending is going to go up, hopefully no more than proportionally to your earnings. Right, so you're probably making less than six figures as a resident right now. Probably going to be making, nice middle, upper six figures at some point. Boy, now I got to get the boat. Now I got to get the cottage. These things. You see how the spending can go up? Set a budget, live within it. And the first thing I recommend every month or every 2 weeks when you get a paycheck, the first bill that goes out is paying yourself. I would encourage you as best you can maximize 401k, maximize Roth IRAs, maximize any employer defined benefit like a 401k or a 403b. Your employer will probably match you up to some modest percentage. Maximize that. Otherwise, you're just leaving money on the table, right? So save as much as you can. Take advantage of the tax loopholes as best as you can. Ask ChatGPT to give you a 15-minute version of the Millionaire Next Door and the Psychology of Money. Write to me. I'll give you some other references. Get on the fat end of that compound interest curve.
If a resident is looking to start private practice after residency, what would you recommend from a financial or legal standpoint?
Yeah. The only way I would recommend that in 2026 is talk to people who have done that, ideally people who are doing that. And if they're my age or older, buyer beware, because we may be talking about some heyday. Um, oh yeah, it's fantastic. You absolutely should because it used to be great. I mean, a lot of folks, if you want to go into private practice, which I highly endorse, I've done it. I enjoyed it. I did it for 5 years, partially because I knew I needed to give it a try. People told me the conventional wisdom was in the middle, like 2020, 2010 to 2015. You just can't possibly go into private practice as a medical oncologist. And I'm bullheaded enough that I'm like, I got to give it a try. So I really enjoyed it. I set up a professional services agreement with an institution that didn't have those services. We found a win-win. It worked well for 5 years. But if you want to go into private practice, you need to remember, in addition to being the medical expert, also got to own the building, which means you got to pay the light bill, which means you got to show up on the weekend when the sewer backs up and find a way to get that cleaned up before Monday morning. I live in the Midwest where thankfully it feels like spring right now, but we've recently had a lot of snow, right? That snow's not going to go away. And I got to make sure that my sidewalks are salted so people don't slip on the ice, break a hip on their way into my office. So there's a lot of things to consider there. I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying if you do it, talk to people who have done it, are doing it, highly recommend it, learn from them. Get a good business advisor, right? You're going to need an accountant and an attorney on your team, and probably some others too. So, and if you'd like to talk about that, send me an email and we'll chat.
When it comes to looking for jobs, attending jobs after residency, Should
Yeah.
residents prioritize an offer with better financial incentives, especially like student loan repayment, over one with better lifestyle incentives?
And again, this is simple math. It doesn't seem simple when you're negotiating your first contract. And again, that's not an accident. Think about how much you learned in medical school and how little you learned about business. When I was thinking about setting up my own practice, I was getting my hair cut one day and I realized my barber learned a lot more about running a business in barber school than I was taught in medical school. Again, probably not on accident. I think we need to undo that. But if you see a contract that looks too good to be true, this is where my I can hear my mom's voice now. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. They want to offer you $1 million. There's probably a reason that you're going to be producing that's greater than that. Look into that math equation. How many RVUs do you need to produce to generate that revenue? And again, it's usually a simple productivity over here, and then my compensation is down there. And now again, I pick. So if I'm a young parent starting out, and right now what I want to do is I'm willing to work a little less, generate a little less, spend time with my growing family, and then slowly ramp that up. That makes sense. So now I'm not even looking at just compensation. I'm looking at the ratio of how much compensation for how many, either RVUs or hours worked or things such as that. And it really is simple math. The more you negotiate contracts, the more you'll start to see that. When I say simple math, I mean it's a simple mathematical formula. This is not easy either. So things can be simple, but not easy. I hope I don't misstate that.
So residents who are earlier career physicians generally don't start with a lot of leverage. Are there any strategies you recommend to prioritize goals outside of residency without giving the impression of a lack of commitment?
Yeah, yeah. Um, so again, I think if you really understand what your values are, what your priorities are, and you can speak to that with conviction, that demonstrates integrity and that helps, add to that leverage. A lot of this comes down to how do you work with your colleagues? How are you being judged by your colleagues, fairly or unfairly? And if they know that when you have time off, you're living to those things, you're walking the talk, fantastic. If on the other hand, you generate a reputation of I'm trying to do as little at work and leave as soon as possible so that I can do things that may or may not be within my value system, that's how a negative reputation can be generated. So it's one of those things, integrity. I was once told you only get a little bottle about that big and you let it out dropper by dropper, right? You got to hang on to that. It takes years, decades, a career to build a reputation. That little integrity bottle can be spilled over and gone within seconds. You turn on the TV or read the newspapers, you'll see stories like that all the time. So I think it's consistently showing up every day, working to the highest quality, living within integrity within your own set of priorities and things like that. That's how you build that leverage. And I knew because again, it was very easy for me to talk about my wife, my kids. Back in the day, before iPhones, right? I had a little picture book in my white coat, and I loved every time I'd show up on the floor. Most times I show up on the floor. The unit clerk or nurse would say, "Hey, Dr. J, first question, how's the family?" And I just made that part of my identity. I'm not saying that's what everyone should do, but whatever you want your identity to be, um, let the world know that and be proud of that.
So I have one final question, and it's kind of in relation to the one you just answered. But during a job interview, what would you consider the best way to express a desire about having a healthy work-life balance?
Yeah. So I probably wouldn't even use that term work-life balance in the interview. I'd be again learning, okay, what is the compensation pattern? Is there a base salary? Is there a uh, productivity bonuses? What are the benefits? Just these are black and white numbers that you can talk about in a very neutral fashion, right? Asking what is the ratio and how is compensation generated? That doesn't mean I want to work a lot or a little. That just means I want to know what are the rules of engagement. And then what I would do is once I get all that information from the people interviewing you and the people that they're going to put on the agenda with you, remember, they're towing the company line. While you're at interview day, get to know as many people as you can, shake as many hands as you can, get as many social media contacts or cell phone numbers as you possibly can and ask permission. Could I reach out to you? The people who aren't on your agenda, maybe they're not on your agenda because, I mean, I'll never forget, and I've always been so grateful. I was interviewing at one clinic, and one of the well, mid-career docs. He was about 10 years my senior, right? The eldest doc in the practice was the one showing me around. He wanted me to come in so that basically he could retire. I'd be generating a lot of utility, and his retirement would continue to grow. And again, I'm making that sound worse than it is, but again, there was a motive. He was so nice to me that day, right? The guy 10 years my senior, who'd been working there for a few years, he wrote his number on the back of a card and he said, call me. And I almost didn't, but I did. And when he did, he just opened up about everything. You know, you ever go to a play and they open up the curtain and you see all these wonderful things happening on stage? And you know there's a lot of craziness happening backstage? He let me into that backstage pass. And then he shared a few other numbers, and I talked to these people, and they painted a picture for me that was very unsettling, and I'm really glad they did. So on your interview day, right? Get dressed up, comb the hair, get a get eh, everyone's gonna be so pleasant, right? Oh, we're shaking hands. Maybe they're gonna take you out to dinner, right? You're gonna go to the nicest place in town. Everyone's gonna tell you all the good stuff. Fantastic. Write that all down. Learn the rules of engagement, but get as many contacts that aren't on your agenda as possible. Ask permission, and then reach out to them and say, "Hey, can I get your perspective?" That's a neutral question. That's not saying, "Hey, give me the good or give me the." Can I get your perspective? And then let them go. Hopefully, it'll be all good. Fantastic. Sign that contract as soon as you can. But if you get something different, again, buyer beware.
Thank you.
Yeah.